2 more sleeps until Father Christmas is coming, and 2 more doors on the Lardy Advent calendar. Today, December the 23rd, we have Nick, who's talking to us about his favourite wargaming period.
What's my favourite period? It probably comes down to 2. I've really tried of late to resist the temptation to get involved in different periods. And the way that I've done that is by telling myself that actually there are only a few set periods that I wargame, and I will not get drawn into building big armies for wargame periods that I do not play. So I failed miserably in that, of course, and I've got lots of different armies for lots of different periods. But I would say that my favourite period still remains World War II. I was I was raised on a diet of World War II films. I remember, being very young and sitting with my granddad and watching World War II films just at the time, really, in the early 70s, when all those great war films of the 1960s were coming onto TV for the first time. So Christmas was a real buffet of war films, and I absolutely loved war films. And I was into Toy Soldiers and Action Man and all that kind of stuff. So anything around the war really sort of floated my boat. So it's World War II. It will always be there as something I'm interested in. But I'm interested in it in not just on the land, but also at sea and in the air. I mean, Bag the Hun, of course, grows out of an interest in the Battle of Britain. I'm fascinated by air combat, particularly early war air combat. I think by late war, some of the aircraft are so phenomenally well armed that I think the first part of the war just holds something a little bit more about that. And at sea, I'm fascinated by the whole thing about how the Kriegsmarine, with its very few capital ships, ever dreamed it could take on the Royal Navy. I love reading about Battle of the River Plate and those kind of things. Again, probably fueled by war films. So Second World War, without question, holds a massive place in my interest, and I'm really, that's really one that I would stick with. Napoleonic would be the second one. My second love probably is to go for Napoleonic. And I'm not really huge on the Peninsula, whereas a lot of people are huge on the Peninsula. I'm interested in some of the smaller states that fought alongside and against Napoleon. So Nassau, for instance, really interests me. I love spending time researching and building up forces like that have got a little something different about them. And I know where this comes from. This comes from the fact that when you go with Richard and you start a new period, Richard very, very quickly buys up the main force, and he's got a main force on the table. So actually what I find most convenient is, I can build the stuff that's around the edges, the things that give it flavour around the edge. And I really love doing that. What I love doing, if I can, is recreating a unit in its entirety, which is what I've been doing with the British Recce. So British Recce for Chain of Command, again, it's something which you could argue is peripheral to the main forces. But my intention there, what I've done is I've built up a British Recce squadron. And so I can actually lay out a British Recce squadron and say, look, this is what they look like. And I love bringing units like that to life on the table. I love being able to look at them and say, this is the kind of space they would have occupied. This is the kit they had. These are the numbers they would have had. And even if you don't get to game with them as that complete unit, the fact that I've got that complete unit in my collection really means something to me. Because I was having this conversation with Sydney actually recently over a beer, and it's when you bring a unit and you put it on the table, you somehow bring those guys. It's like you bring those guys back to life again. They're there for a moment again. The airborne reconnaissance squadron. You put the jeeps on the table for a moment. Those guys exist again, and you can almost name them individually. And I absolutely love that when we do refights. The fact that we get things as historically accurate as we can means that you can actually say, wow, this is what that attack might have looked like. And so that for me is a massive part of it. So World War II in that regard, Napoleonic in that same regard. And again, like World War II with Napoleonic, it's not just on land, it's also at sea. I would have Napoleonic in the air, but the only person who thinks we had air power during that time was is currently in the White House. So there's nothing available for me to build up in terms of my Napoleonic naval Air Force, but the Navy and armies, yep, absolutely, they're me. So for me, it's World War II in first place, Napoleonic in second, and then after that, I guess I'd have to say that judging by the amount of metal I've got in my garage, then I would probably say that it's First World War in Palestine. Those would be my top 3 wargaming periods.
Remember, lard is for life and not just for Christmas.